I think when the Me Too movement started a few years ago, where women were suddenly talking a lot more about sexual and emotional abuse, it was one that never really got mentioned. And finances are the easiest and best way to control another human. If you don't have access to funds, where do you go? What do you do? It's not a normal way that we've known societally for thousands of years. It is something very new that we're navigating because it is different. And that, people are being taken advantage of because of these changes, but they are very new still. And to try and work our way through them, it is a very different thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the King Dems Podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect art. We live, ladies and gentlemen. You once again welcome to the King Dems Podcast. And today I have with me a very important guest from the world down under. Make welcome Amanda Cassar. How are you, Amanda?
Very well for this early in the morning. Thank you for having me on.
Wow, early in the morning in Australia, and of course it is good evening or good night in London, England. Many thanks to technology, the world is now a global village. I can literally connect with you, from my side of the world. How's the weather like in Australia? Let's start with the weather.
Look, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day today, which is very cliche for Australia, but we have had a lot of rain lately. So that's impacted a lot. We had tropical cyclone Alfred a few weeks ago, so our beaches took a bit of a pounding, but we're on the mend now.
Wow. I don't like rain, but living in London, England.
You must have sent it our way because we don't usually get this much.
I think we gave you guys some of the rain because
You must have.
we're tired. We did have an extended winter here, and it wasn't funny at all. So I guess we just had to pass some of the bad weather to you. We're sorry on behalf of the people.
It sounds fair.
of
We usually
London,
get
England.
our lion's share of great weather, so all good.
Yeah, sharing is caring,
I'm feeling the love.
Wow, nice. Man, I'm always so excited to speak with people with a finance background, because I'm a numbers guy. So you are into financial abuse, right? You are a financial abuse specialist. You're an author, you're an advocate, you are a visionary leader, but you are heavily into financial literacy and creating legacy. So I'm really curious, how did you get into finance? Because you were it's like you did not get into finance. Finance got you.
Pretty
So how
much.
did it happen?
Well, I'd actually never even heard of a financial advisor when I left high school.
Wow.
I didn't even know that was a career choice. So I went to work for a life insurance guy who was a friend of my dad's, also was an ex-UK guy who moved out to the Gold Coast with his family in the 80s. And when I finished
UK
high
and
school,
Australia ties.
there is a big, for the motherland, big ties. So, yeah, I went to work as his secretary when I left high school. My dad was also an insurance guy, so came into the business. And I guess the rest is history. I bought him out of business in 2014 when he retired. So it was, something I kind of fell into. They said, would you like to be his secretary when I was about 17 or 18? And ended up buying the business. I think they call that sweat equity.
Yeah, sweat equity.
So, yeah, I fell into it, basically.
Wow. You fell into it, but did you fall in love with it?
I fell in love with the idea that I was making a difference and could help people. And I haven't met too many financial advisors who at their core don't really just want to help people. So that I love. Why wouldn't you?
I love it when people have a heart of kindness. A heart of kindness is what motivates you to pick up a vocation or a career or an occupation, profession, whatever it is you call it, that is aimed at helping people. So you have that kind heart, you have that empathy for people. because typically man is a selfish animal, and the number one rule in the jungle is self-preservation. But when you go above that self-preservation to people preservation, you are on a higher dimension, on a higher plane as a human being.
One does one bit.
So for me, I'm grateful, interacting with a human being like yourself. And like I always love to say on the podcast, gratitude is good attitude. When a person shares their time with you, they share their life with you. So thank you very much once again for, sharing your time today and of course your life today on the podcast. But for you, what would you say is your why? Because there's always a method to the madness. If there's a method to the madness, then you need to be checked in a psychiatric facility.
And look, it should be such a clear cut. Look, here it is on a silver platter, but I don't know that I came to my way easily. I got involved with some charity work like the Hunger Project, and I was, off in Africa, and all these women around me were having these incredible epiphanies, and I'm sitting there going, I want my epiphany. Why can't I, work things out? And it was one of those moments where, I was trying to force it. And my why really is about legacy and giving back and helping people and cutting through the BS that's involved in finance, for want of a better word. And just, I love the idea of being able to make the complex simple. And that when people come to see me, even if it's just an initial meeting, they walk away going, oh my gosh, I feel so much better already. And I'm like, but I haven't done anything. And they're like, but you listened. So it's
Yeah,
being
it's like
able to
therapy.
it is a bit. So it's like being able to take that load off. You feel a bit knight in shining armor, and you're able to make a difference and help people because, finances are one of the biggest causes of concern in relationships and families and a reason for fighting. And we're not taught enough about financial literacy and how to make our money work for us. So being in that position of trust where people come to you to help is a real privilege.
I can very, very much relate to what you're saying. Having been an auditor with two of the global Big Four accounting firms, I've had the privilege to consult for some of the largest corporations in the world and sit in the same room with, some of the most powerful captains of industry. And you'll see what is a common denominator is that business acumen amongst those people and shared financial literacy amongst those people. And then you see on the other end of the spectrum, startups, SMEs, most of this, everyday people struggling. And we even see some of our friends, relatives, family members struggle, even though they are like specialists in very complex subjects or areas of life. You can see a medical doctor, for example, struggling financially. And you ask, what is wrong? The problem is they really never got that financial literacy, financial education to plan finances in a very simple and structured way. It's really sad to see, and it's also happy to see great-minded individuals like yourself taking it upon themselves, to ensure that this problem is actually resolved. It's really, really, lovely to see people like you take it upon yourself to ensure that this issue is actually resolved. So, for yourself, what's one surprising fact about you that people do not see on your LinkedIn profile, but it plays a big role in who you are?
I think it's a fairly new one that I became a grandmother in the last 2 years. I don't think I've advertised that on LinkedIn. And seeing that next generation, like my grandmother's still alive and now I'm a grandmother. So we've got 5 generations in our family. And I think suddenly
Wow.
being that piggy in the middle, it's very circle of life. And, I know my grandmother's 92 this week, and
Wow.
my grandson's 2. So
And it's
I know
long
she
life and
won't be around.
prosperity.
Yeah, she won't be around for a lot longer, but, there's this next generation that's already kicking in. And, I think it shows, you don't think you're ever going to be old, or, those
Mm.
things happen to you. You're going to be, 29 and bulletproof forever. So it feels very circle of life, and, wanting to make an impact and have those relationships with my grandkids and be there for them and, teach them. And it's just such a gorgeous thing to watch them grow up and, stumble and fall and make mistakes and pick themselves up, and their little optimistic attitude and smiles. It's yeah, just one of my latest, biggest, wonderfulest things.
Wow. So I was actually asking, what's that one surprising fact about you that people do not see on your LinkedIn profile, but it plays a big role in who you are as a person?
That was being a grandma.
Whoa. Yeah, that's true.
I think
That's
we did
actually
cover
true.
that one.
Yeah, we deep dive that. Okay, so now is the time to deep dive into the heart of your work. What is the number one mindset shift that moved you, from surviving to thriving financially?
Mindset shifts, I think, are often hard to come by. It's obviously the root of why we need to change, but I think education plays a massive part in that. And delving back into the stories we picked up or learned as children, about what our parents believed about money, plays a
Mm,
massive part in who we are as we get older. So often our parents didn't teach us any lessons, but there would be things like money doesn't grow on trees, it takes money to make money. Sometimes only the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So these lessons or sayings that we've heard over time, I think we need to understand, do we really believe those? Or have we come up with our own ideas on what makes the world go round, or how does money work? And then we can start looking at, pardon me, you know, is money a tool of abundance, or do we live in this scarcity mode all the time where there's never enough? We need to hang on to every cent we've got, which stops us from being generous and thriving. So there's so many ideas that conflict about money. I think it's, to get any mindset shift on it, we need to really examine what we believe, what our parents showed us if they didn't teach us, and whether they still work for us. Do they help us move forward, or are they holding us back? So I think the mindset shift needs to come from education and examining our beliefs.
I love what you said, and I am a man of faith. I'm a Christian, and it very much aligns with what the Bible says about your beliefs. The Bible says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So the mind is a very powerful tool. Whatever it is that you utilize it towards, you can actually achieve. And that's why my biggest mantra, and I use that in the documents and, on this podcast, conceive, believe, achieve. Yeah, it starts from the mind. You touched on the scarcity mindset. For a lot of people, they keep living in that scarcity mode, and it's difficult to break them off that mode, and it creates certain people into hoarders. And for me, hoarders are some of the most irritating human beings on earth.
I think there's also some, deep psychological reasons why. And look, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, so I can't speak from a medical point of view. But we know a lot of people, after the wars became hoarders. They never knew where their next meal was coming from, or their next anything. So, there was the reuse, recycle, fix things mentality. And then whatever you get, hang on to it, because you don't know when you'll get something else. Our parents and grandparents grew up in that world of scarcity, which seems so strange to us because we've only known a world of abundance. There's too much. We're always, told to be that consumer. We can buy things and throw them away if we don't like them anymore. It's a very different world to grow up in, which is, I think, why many of us don't understand, because we haven't lived through that, to understand, that mindset of hanging on to things, that scarcity versus abundance.
That's actually very true. There's a psychological tone to it, and for a lot of those human beings, they have not been able to overcome their traumas. And that is, I think, for the therapist to deal with. But unfortunately, a lot of people are still not open to the concept of therapy. I think that's another podcast on its own.
It isn't it? I think of it very simply that when the body needs help, we see a doctor. If the mind needs help, we see someone who can help with that. I don't have any issues with people seeking professional help because we don't know what we don't know. And, you grow up all your lives thinking your parents are normal, and then you might find out that they're not as normal as you thought they were.
Hmm. Yeah,
So, so it doesn't hurt to understand other people's points of view and be open to learning new things.
yeah. I think I always say this, that a lot of people in my parents' generation, I'm a social scientist. I did study economics for my first degree, and I did courses in psychology. I did courses in psychology, sociology, anthropology, demographics, and social statistics. So I very much understand social dynamics and observe people as a social researcher. And sometimes, be in
Keep
some sort of
watching. It's so much fun.
yeah, I'm telling you, be some covert, social experimentation. There's a lot of social experiments that go on around us, but we don't realize that this is a social experiment ongoing. But if only you observe and you keep absorbing the data like a sponge, then you can make a very, very serious analysis. I'm telling you. The same way we make financial analysis, you could make
Indeed.
analysis, on people and their social trends, in terms of the ongoings of the social dynamics. I always say, from Africa, I grew up in Nigeria, and I noticed that a lot of people in my parents' generation are not open to the concept of therapy, and they leave they're walking traumas on the road. They're
As
just
my father
traumas
called it,
walking
psychobabble
walking on
mumbo
around.
jumbo.
And something funny. I think a lot of them did not realize that they were struggling with mental health challenges. And for some of them, they utilized religion as their source of therapy. And that is why in Africa, the religious leaders have a lot of, relevance even in family relations. A lot of people go to their pastors, their imams for counseling, and even like deep personal and family issues that typically should not be the place of a spiritual leader to be providing advice on. You know, big respect to the spiritual leaders, but there are certain things that they're probably not, appropriately trained on. Let's take, for example, health issues. You're not a health expert. You shouldn't be advising a person on chronic illnesses, for example, even mental illnesses, for example. Some of these people get dismissed as spiritually possessed. A person who is on the autism spectrum, for example, or ADHD, would be dismissed as, they say, you just need to pray for the person. But sometimes when you understand these, conditions from a medical perspective, it helps you to be able to deal with these individuals appropriately. So it's just
I
a
think that's
different
important
ballgame.
that, yeah, we stick to our knitting. And I find that when I delve into the financial abuse cases, we're not therapists. We can help you
Mhm,
with the finances. And
mhm,
it's the same, if you do have a spiritual leader that you go to, they're helping you with your spiritual side. They're not there
mhm.
to look after your mental health. And look, to a degree, understanding your spirituality or your finances can help with mental health, but
Exactly.
they're not
Very,
professionals
very
in
true.
that space. So, and I think that's an important distinction that we all make, where we, try our best to stick to our lane.
Yeah, stick to your area of core competence, right? But when everyone sticks to their area of core competence, it makes, things better. Something that makes me sad about the situation in Africa is there are many dubious spiritual leaders.
Yeah,
and
when it
they
becomes about
take
the power, not about the person,
yeah
yeah, you're in trouble.
they take the opportunity to exploit people. And religion is something that is very strong and sensitive. If you told a person that their spiritual leaders are exploiting them, they would even fight you. So I just tend to, as usual, as a social researcher, just observe.
Yes, indeed.
You know,
The actions will speak louder than the words.
it's always a sweet spot to just observe, social interactions.
Yes, I enjoy sitting at a cafe and just watching the world go by. It's one of my favourite things to do.
And you know something, that's why for me, I love sports. But at some point, I discovered the sweetest way to enjoy sports is to be a neutral. May the best man win.
Yes, they don't always, but yes,
I wish both teams luck.
yes, yes, indeed,
I'm not
I
here
get
to
it.
support anybody. But, coming back to the whole financial abuse thing, what are the common financial mistakes you see people make, especially women and business owners, and how can they avoid them?
The biggest one is just living beyond your means. It's very
Mm.
simple, it's very boring, but we live in a very consumerist society. If you're someone who likes to sit back and watch what are the Kardashians up to and what's this family doing and wanting to be part of that society where looks are
Keeping up with the
important.
Joneses.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what handbag I wear, or what brand is on, the black t-shirt that I could buy anywhere else. So I think that many people fall into that trap that they have to look a certain part or be a certain way. And it's the champagne attitude on the beer budget. It just doesn't work. So it's a very simple thing to sit back and work out your finances and can you afford something. Look, if you have to put it on a credit card, you can't afford it. Don't buy it. Very simple. So, understanding what our means are and living within them is one of the first ways to take back control financially. And it's a very big mistake lots of people make. And in business as well, I think most people go into it with they're a very good contractor or they've got an idea, but they don't become business people overnight. You need coaching in how to be a business person. You might be the world's greatest plasterer and don't want to work for your buddy or your boss anymore, but you may know nothing about running a business. So understanding how many things do I need, how many widgets do I need to make to break even? When's my profit margin? What insurances do I have to take out? Understanding everything that goes along with it isn't something that you can just, take a 1 hour course on, hang up a shingle, and you're ready to go. So I think being naive is probably fairly common when going into business. Was for me. I'm not a bad financial planner, but I didn't know anything about running a business. So understanding all that goes along with it is really important.
I like the way you framed it really, really nicely. And I think it still aligns with what I said previously, that there are people who are experts at complex fields, but they know nothing about finances, and it tends to crumble sort of people because it they won't tell you in school, but even in Harvard, they don't teach you to be streetwise. They only teach you to be book smart. But to be a well-rounded person, you need to be streetwise and you need to be book smart. And they won't tell you your
And look, it's not a
finances
reason.
affect your mental health.
Yeah, it's not a reason not to follow your dreams. If you've got those big ideas and want to pursue them, please, don't let it stop you. But there's
Hmm.
so much information available now. I don't think we've ever lived in a time where you can't get the information you want. I
God
mean, back
bless
in
you.
the old days, you had to go to a library and borrow an encyclopedia or sit there all day and with the microfiche trying to find what you were after. At our fingertips these days, we carry the phone around everywhere. It's got anything you could find. Not always true, but there's there's so much available to us to research.
And I've said this before, we're in an age where there's so much information, but there's so much foolishness. Like the height of foolishness in human history is at its peak right now. We have artificial intelligence even to support us, but we have great human foolishness. Like, what is happening? Before we used to think, oh, information, they say knowledge is power, something. Information is key, but you have so much information, but people, and it's easily accessible, I'm a millennial, and I sort of feel like I'm in a sweet spot wherein I saw a lot of technological evolution. I used to go to the library, follow the library coding systems to find, the books to read on certain subject matters. And then the age of Google came. You could Google anything, and ChatGPT, Claude, and other AI tools came along, and you can utilize them. But people still ask very, very foolish questions. And sometimes I could be sarcastic when a person asks me a really, really foolish question. You know what I tell them? I say, excuse me, do you have a smartphone? Do you have a phone? They say yes, right? Now, on this your phone, were you actually banned from using Google? Were you banned from using ChatGPT? And then they were like, what's your problem now? I'm like, it is something you can easily just take your phone. Take your phone. Take that. What are you using that phone for? Take that phone and type it in and you get that information.
Yeah. I suppose there's also that human connection. They want to ask the questions and have conversation. I think people are also lonely, and it's a way of having an interaction to ask questions of, even if it drives other people mental. There's your social interaction part.
Anyways, maybe that is an excuse. I like you. You would always find.
Not
You,
everybody likes honesty.
I remember growing up, my mom used to say, a foolish question deserves a foolish answer.
Indeed, yes. My mum used to ask a silly question, get a silly answer. The wisdom of our mothers.
I tell you, mothers are the best. They say you can fool the world, but you can't fool your mom.
Very true. Very true.
Wow. You are always, talking about ethical investing and wealth with values. So how can individuals align their portfolios with their personal values without compromising on returns on investment?
It's an interesting space, and the millennials seem to be driving this. They want
Why
to invest
people?
with purpose. Exactly. It's not just, put me in the best investment that's going really well, because I don't want to be investing in tobacco companies or gun companies, or I don't want companies that use, possible slave labor to,
Mm-hmm.
you can walk up the high street, and if you look at, use your Google, use your phone, where do these people get their labor from? Are they doing this really cheaply in China or northern India and, exploiting people to make the goods? So there's becoming a social awareness about it. And yet still a lot of people, it doesn't fly on their radar. I'll go into a shop to buy some makeup, and one of the first questions I'll ask is it cruelty free? And yet I've got a girlfriend who's gone, I've never asked that question in my life. I don't know. And I'm like, well, maybe it's not important to you. It is to me. So I think there's a burgeoning awareness and understanding your values. Some people are still prepared to go, you know what, I really love that makeup brand, I don't care. Or I really want that t-shirt, I don't care. Whereas to me, there's brands I will not buy from. And it probably makes absolutely no difference to that brand that I'm taking a stand. But if enough people do, maybe it will. And it's the same with investing. Do we want those companies that are exploiting people? And, maybe you don't care if there's guns and tobacco, but slave labor's your thing, or exploiting children. There's so many.
Exploiting children, that is a very, very terrible thing. And I think you were just reminding me of the situation in West Africa with the cocoa famine and the chocolate industry. It was a very, very serious issue. And I think that there are now NGOs coming up to assess the supply chain for the major players in that industry. So for some of them, they have the labels of, cruelty free from child labor.
Fair
I
trade.
think
Yep.
I applaud such initiatives, and it makes sense that you care about the process behind your investment.
Mm. And like for some people, if it's, the cheapest thing available and that's their resources because they're on a minimum wage, I completely understand that. You go, look, I don't have a choice. So maybe that's true. Or maybe you
Everyone
make
has
a
choice.
stand anyway. Everyone has a choice, exactly. So it comes down to, how driven are you by your values that you're actually going to look into it and make a stand? Or Are you just looking for, where will I get the best bang for my buck with the investments? I mean, again, if you just chase what did really well last year, it's probably not going to do as well this year. So do you just have a long-term investment philosophy that you sit down with your professional advisor and work through, and, markets go up and down? They always will. At the moment we've got Trump factor. In the past, we've had an oil crisis, we've had a dot-com bubble, we've had the Japan crisis. Everyone's like, but it's different this time. And it's different every time, but the result's the same. Markets are volatile. So, do you want to have an ethical overlay? Some people go, look, I wouldn't mind having some of that. Perhaps I'll put some of my portfolio into ethical investments. Other people are like, I know some millennials, I will not invest in anything that's not an ethical investment. So it's a very personal choice. I know in the UK you have access to the David Attenborough principles, and there's a set of investments around them that with a very ethical flavour, that some of the bigger guys have come up with to address those needs. And I think driven by that millennial or the grandchildren, a lot of the grandparents now who are quite wealthy are telling their grandchildren, oh, look, I've invested in these ethical investments, for your future, so that they get some brownie points with the grandchildren, but only if their financial advisors are taking up the subject with them. So I raised it with a client of mine and I said, look, do you have any ethical considerations? And he's like, well, I don't want coal mines in my portfolio. I said, all right, well, I noticed you've got some BHP shares and BHP owns some coal mines. He goes, you're not selling my BHP shares. So I'm like, coal mines aren't that important because he still wanted that in his portfolio. So it's, is it not having the coal mine more important or having the returns from that share? So I think most of us haven't sat down and even had to think about what values would drive our investment. So there are ethical questionnaires out there that you can take to find if you do want to look at that or explore that path, that there are risk profiling tools to put an ethical shade on your investment portfolio.
I think that is pretty much well said. And yeah, I appreciate the way you framed it. But while you're speaking, you were talking about the volatility of the markets, especially from a global perspective. There will always be the peaks and the troughs, right? But in your opinion, as a financial planning expert, what is the best investment vehicle and best investment strategy to ride the peaks and troughs and have sustained, or would I say sustainable growth in the long term?
Look, I don't think there's a cookie cutter approach to that because people have very different needs. If you're younger, you might be a lot more aggressive with your portfolio because you're starting out, you don't have as much. Where older people who need their portfolio to last, through their frailty years may need to be a bit more conservative. So I think understanding what your needs are, how you're prepared to invest, and sticking to your philosophy when you go, you know what, that works for me. Sitting down with your planner and going, I'm happy to stick with this strategy. I know it will go up and down. So for someone who's, living off we call them a superannuation pension, where you have your investment money for your retirement, we might put 3 to 5 years of that money into a cash or fixed interest part so that we go, look, we know the markets are going to go up and down in that time frame. You don't have to worry about your part of that income for the next 5 years. The rest of your portfolio will be exposed to the volatility, but you know that your income is going to be there for the next 3 to 5 years. That may be a safety net strategy that you're prepared to take on board. Whereas, when you're younger and accumulating, you might go, all right, the markets are down. I've got a little bit extra. I'm going to throw it into it while they're down because I know they'll come back up again. So you can afford to be a little bit more bullish. And, when things are down, go, right, that's the time. If I look at the charts that go up and down over the years, I wish I'd bought there. I wish I'd bought there in all those bottom bits. It's a very difficult thing to do when the news is bad, markets are down. The media loves to play those stories. $1 billion taken off the market today. Most people aren't sitting at home going, think I'll pop more into that. They're usually going, oh my God, my portfolio. So it's very difficult to get over the hype and go, sounds like a perfect time to invest. So understanding that as well is a really cool thing.
A lot of people are into the hype of certain index funds. So take the S&P 500, for example, Fortune 500, you know, a lot of the top hyped tech stock, people are just, would I say, very, very hyped up on, gassed up on these kind of assets in their portfolio. But a lot of people lack that financial education to assess something as simple as the price earnings ratio. The price to earnings ratio is very, very important. There are penny stocks with better price to earnings ratio, right? And also you need to look at the sustainability over time. So how do you approach advising people that want to just go for the noise? They don't sieve the noise, right, from the voice and the market. How do you make them understand the implications behind just jumping on the hype?
I think it comes down to the old, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I'm not sure that index investing as a rule falls into that, probably certain parts of it. I think for people who aren't terribly financial literate and aren't overly engaged with their portfolios, some index investing can be a very good core part of a strategy. If you don't want to chase active managers and pay a premium for that, index is a really cool core part. But look, whether you just follow the NASDAQ or, that's probably not a well diversified portfolio because there's not a lot of stocks in that space. And whether the Magnificent Seven, as they're known, or six, as we're coming to, is the best thing forever. We can look at the top 10 stocks in any decade in the last, 100 years. And there's ones that have completely disappeared. Kodak invented the digital camera and they're no longer here. They performed as part of the portfolio for many, many years. Watching indexes isn't a bad idea, but again, it goes back to all the cliches. Do you put all your eggs in one basket? So, diversification is a really important thing, and having both local and international exposure in our portfolios is a good idea. The Australian shares at the moment are very highly valued. We have some of the most expensive banks in the world. There's probably not a lot of growth and not a lot of income in our stocks for some time. So is it the time to start looking at smaller or medium companies? Is it time to start looking overseas? So understanding the global macro as well as what's going on locally is really important. And if you don't have the time and the bandwidth for it, pay someone who does.
Like Amanda Cassar. Okay, by the way, I guess maybe towards the end of the word, or we could even do it now. How can the audience get to reach you for financial planning
I'm
advisory?
only licensed to give advice to Australians in the audience.
Wow. Aussie.
So look, I do know some beautiful British advisors and American advisors. There's an international organisation called the $1 Million Roundtable that has a very good code of ethics and about 95,000 members all around the world. You can always find me on LinkedIn if you've got some basic questions that, don't relate to your particular circumstances that are fairly generic. But yeah, you Google Amanda Cassar. I'm not the yoga instructor in America. I'm the financial advisor in Australia. Just making sure you're looking at the right one because she might not know.
Put it in the description of the podcast. Guys, go catch the right one.
Yeah.
I'm going to put your LinkedIn link in the
If you want a
description
great
of the
bod, she's
podcast.
probably a better option.
But yeah, I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on ETFs, the exchange traded funds?
I love the idea of them. I mean, a lot of people come to me with a portfolio where they've picked individual stocks, but an ETF, is a basket of those
Diversified.
stocks. So for a diversification play, if you don't have a lot of money to start with, I think ETFs are a lovely way to get started and give you exposure to more than you'd be able to afford by just individual stock picking.
Okay, so let's talk about retirement now. So for someone in their 30s or 40s
Oh,
who
you're never going to
feels,
get old. Don't worry about it.
for those in their 40s, 30s, and let's even say 50s as well, many of them feel like they're left behind. So what are the top 3 steps they can take today to get back on track and work towards securing the future?
I think whatever age your little wake up call is at, you always realize, I wish I'd started this 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But today's always the second best day to start. So if you missed that opportunity earlier, then today, let's get back on track from today and do the best we can in our circumstances. Secondly, I think understanding our cash flow is always vitally important, because you can't sit there and go, right, from now on, I'm putting $1,000 a week into my retirement fund if you don't have $1,000 a week to put into it. You don't want to be taking food off the table and not paying your bills because suddenly retirement looks scary. So, yeah, first, today's a good time to start. Secondly is understanding your cash flow. And thirdly, again, if you haven't been trained in finances, or you've made some poor decisions, or things aren't going as well as you'd like, seek professional help. These people do this all day, every day. And shop around. Don't just go to the first person that turns up on your Google search. They may have nothing in alignment or be the advisor for you. So interview them. See someone you're comfortable with, someone who aligns with your values. You don't have to just go with, because you went to a barbecue and Auntie Betty said her bloke's the best. There's horses for courses. Some of them specialise in things you may want nothing to do with. Find out.
Oh, what a great way to segue into financial abuse and advocacy. There's something I always like to say: when the use of a thing is unknown, abuse is inevitable. I'd love for you to explain what financial abuse is.
It's basically the ability of someone to control the finances of another person, but not in a way that is in their best interest or benefits them. So we often hear about elder abuse, where a child or a carer is taking funds from an elderly relative. It often occurs in partnerships, marriages. A wife may be forced to work in a family business for free, or she's told you're not allowed to study or better yourself. You must, work in a supermarket only. We don't want you to learn. It can be coercive control, where it's, here's only $100 a week for the family groceries and that's all you're allowed to have and you've got to make it last. Or micromanaging of finances. I know where the women are the breadwinners and the husbands make them bring home or have access to their account so that they know where every cent is spent. So there's a very wide range of activities that constitute the red flags of financial abuse.
You created the globally distributed financial abuse specialist accreditation. So, what inspired this, and why is financial abuse awareness more urgent today than yesterday?
I got interested in financial abuse a few years ago. I wrote a book, and it was an interview style book with 18 different people. So I interviewed financial advisors, I interviewed wealthy business people, I interviewed people surviving on Social Security, and I wanted to know what their money stories were, how they got into the situation they were, had they made mistakes, had they overcome them, what was the best advice they'd been given, what did they want to teach their children. And one of the stories really stuck with me. It was a lady who was an award-winning investigative journalist who walked into a marriage with a trust fund and a property and came out of it absolutely broken. She was skimming off the groceries to leave cards at a girlfriend's house so that when she had the courage to leave, she would have money for her and her daughter for groceries. She ended up having a stroke, getting adult onset epilepsy from the trauma. He took everything. And I mean, we're talking a smart, savvy woman, and it happens far too often. And I sort of, I guess, went down the rabbit hole going, why have I never heard of this before? How come I haven't come across this? And realized I probably had, but didn't know what to look for. I didn't know the sign. It could be as simple as a husband and wife sitting opposite a financial advisor, and every time you ask one of them a question, the other one answers for them, or belittles their responses, or doesn't let them be involved in the decision making, or you only ever meet one partner because, the other one's not terribly interested. They're kept at home in the dark about what's going on. So it can be simple things like that. It's like, well, I'd love, your partner to be involved in the conversation. It's your family's finances. It was a real eye-opener for me in a professional capacity to go, am I aware enough of what's going on? And if I come across it, what do I do? Because there's no 3-step process and you're fixed. There's no little cookie cutter, I'll, wave my magic wand and all of a sudden the financial abuse goes away. It's a highly complex area. I think when the Me Too movement started a few years ago, where women were suddenly talking a lot more about sexual and emotional abuse, it was one that never really got mentioned. And finances are the easiest and best way to control another human. If you don't have access to funds, where do you go? What do you do? And I think in the States, they did a survey where about 99% of all domestic violence cases include financial abuse. And when we ask those victim blaming questions, if it was that bad, why didn't you leave? Often the answer is that they feared for their lives. And secondly, they had no money, no resources to go
For their
anywhere.
livelihoods as well.
So it's a confronting topic. You probably need to do a trigger warning at the start of it because it's, alarming for a lot of people. And I think if you haven't seen, it's like healthy relationships. If your parents had a loving, beautiful, normal relationship, you know that that's what a healthy relationship looks like. You never even question it. Whereas if you've only ever grown up in a dysfunctional family and there's been fighting and abuse and control, that's all you know what a relationship looks like. So it's also the same in healthy financial relationships between partners. Do you have goals that you work to? Do you have some autonomy where you both keep your money but put either a set amount into a family account that you're working for something, but you still have a backstop? So no one sits down before they gets married to go, right, let's talk about what we're doing with our finances. It sort of just happens over time, or, it's not often a controlled discussion about how we're going to do this. Like, do you want kids one day? Those kind of things, that all the stuff that you should talk about first that you hope just works out. And finance is a huge part of that.
Speaking of the trigger warnings, what are the telltale signs? What are those very, very easy red flags to spot for the average person? And sometimes there's something they say, what I say on the British transport system that I love a lot. They say if you see something that doesn't seem right, please speak to staff or call British Transport Police on 61016. See it, say it, sorted. I love that line. I love it. So sometimes family members see these things, friends see these things, associates see these things, but they probably don't have a trained eye or turn a blind eye or are looking at a blind spot. So, what are the signs that when you see, you should, as a duty of care to an individual that is a family or friend, seek to maybe, did I say, do a bit of deep dive or speak up?
Yeah, there was probably the best illustration of it was the case of a murder that happened in Queensland some time ago. There was a woman who went missing, husband raised the alarm. I think they had 3 young girls at the time. Turned out the husband had murdered her. The girls were old enough to go to school now and she wanted to go back to work. And the parents started a campaign after her death called #SaySomething. And over many years, they'd watched him become more and more controlling of her, kept her at home with the girls as long as he possibly could. They'd watched him take credit cards away from her, that the shoes she was wearing were becoming more and more scuffed and raggedy. She never had new clothing. She wasn't allowed to buy anything for herself. And like many people, they just thought, look, it's their marriage, it's between them, it's none of our business.
I hate that thing. Like when people don't have the courage to speak up, you should
So,
always
and
speak up
they
for the.
then they had the guilt because it was their daughter who got murdered because they didn't say something. They didn't say to her, we're uncomfortable that you've been wearing these shoes for 5 years and they're full of holes, or it doesn't feel right to us. Is everything okay? Just there's a lovely formula that a psychologist once told me that follows a path called I feel, when, because. Instead of saying, your husband's a rat bag, how dare he do that to you? I can see, it's very accusatory, or I hope I said that right. But when you say, I feel hurt or sad or angry when Bill took the credit card off you, or you haven't had a new pair of shoes, or we haven't had a girls' night out, because we used to have such a lovely time, where you always used to be such a snazzy dresser, or whatever it is. It's that formula. So you're talking about your own feelings. It's very hard for the person to turn around and go, don't speak like that to me. Bill's a great provider and, stop accusing me. Whereas if it's like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, or it also alerts the person that maybe they're not going mad, because they might be thinking, perhaps this is normal. He keeps telling me it's normal. They might have been gaslit for so long they question their own sanity about whether the situation they're in is normal, because he's told them. And I'm generalizing with women here. I understand that. But it is most often women who, because they're in the roles of caregiver for elderly parents and children, that they often leave the workforce for extended times. So it is an easy way of just saying, I'm noticing what's happening with you. Because some people are like, I might lose the friendship over it. Please lose the friendship rather than your friend's life.
Mm-hmm.
It's that important that they know that somebody sees what's happening, has been kind enough to say, I'm uncomfortable with what's happening in your life, that when they are ready, which they may not be for some time, they know there's a listening ear, that somebody saw what was happening, that they're not alone, that you could be that safe place for them to go if they need to organise an escape plan. And they will always know their own safety better than anybody else, whether it's time to go. So being that person and just going, look, I am uncomfortable, but if you ever want to talk about it, I'm here for you. So not trying to force it, because some people will never be ready to go or never be ready to talk about it. But I think knowing that somebody has seen it and cares means they're not going mental, which they may think they are.
Exactly. Because gaslighting could really have a very, very severe psychological impact on individuals. And I like the way you framed it, that it's better to lose a friendship than to lose a person's life. And persons like myself, we are modern day gladiators, because I tend to offend a lot of friends, by telling them the truth about circumstances. And I noticed a pattern over time that I tend to, when I speak the truth, to help you, I might offend you in the short run, but most of them come back in the long run and tell me thank you.
It's a difficult position to put yourself in, but yeah, sometimes the
It's
truth does hurt.
difficult, but like I've just accepted it, that's the way life has to be. Because I've had situations in which I told a person something that was right and they did not take it nicely at all. And it took them 2 years to call me and say, wow, thank you very much for that piece of advice. Thank you very much, for the tough love. I was like, so it
And
took
we
you
all know
24 months.
situations, yeah, we've been in where we haven't been ready for it to land, or something that we've heard over and over and over. And one day we just go, right, the penny dropped because we were ready for it to land. We've probably heard it a dozen times before, but we're just in the right headspace for it at that moment. So we can all relate to, taking offense at something when we first hear it. And usually when we do that, we know that that's a trigger because it's landed with us and we didn't like it. So maybe we need to examine that a bit harder.
I used to have a friend that when I tell them something, they don't get it. And there's this pattern of them getting it after 6 months. I'm like, does it always have to take you 6 months?
Hey, at least they got it in the end.
Dude, this guy, you're a bad guy while you're listening to truth.
Told you, truth hurts.
Yeah, but like on a more serious note, how can people, not be like me, don't be harsh about it and, try, because sometimes you really don't know the level at which this abuse has eaten into the core of a person. It's like a cancer. You don't know if it's early stage, you don't know if it's late stage. That's why sometimes like the harsh approach of persons like myself, actually works. If it's early stage, maybe a diplomatic approach might be
I think it all
useful.
depends on the personality of the person, again, and the relationship we have with them. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
very easy to go, like you, it's harsh. Here's the truth. I'm smacking you over the head with it. Deal with it. And there's other times you go, look, I really don't want to raise this. I'm really uncomfortable about discussing it with you, but I'm coming from a place of love. And I'm very
Mhm.
concerned about X or Y or Z. So I think positioning it that way, whether they see it or not that way, will be up to them. That's not up to you. But if you let them know that you're coming from that place, and again, it can be hard to hear, but yeah, there's so many different personality types and how we do things, and I'm a fairly blunt speaker as well. Don't know if you picked that up, but there's certainly times when you do need
That is
to
why
tread.
we're on the same podcast today.
There's certainly times where treading a little more carefully is wise.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Because as blunt as I can be, sometimes I realize that, bro, you have to tone it down this
Dial
time.
it back, dial it back.
Yeah. And here's somebody asked me for advice one time. And then I asked the person, do you want to hear the real answer or you want to hear the diluted one?
And sometimes it is just the diluted one they want. I've asked people the same thing too. So yeah, do you want the real truth, or
You want a
sorry, you
concentrated
can't handle
version?
the truth?
So pick your choice, concentrate or diluted.
Yeah,
What do you want?
baby steps for some people, definitely.
But in terms of like would I say regulatory authorities, government bodies, like what's relevant institutions do you recommend that sometimes, people that spot financial abuse
I
should
think it's
make a
such a
report to?
complex and layered area, and financial abuse is very rarely a standalone form of abuse. It usually is part of a bigger scheme with perhaps family violence or domestic violence or coercive control or emotional abuse. So, because it's part of a bigger package, that we know of places that you can go to, maybe the biggest issue at the start is the family violence. That might be something. So, it may need be run off to a shelter. Perhaps financial counsellors can help. And again, I'll go back to women who've been told for many, many years, you're terrible with money, you're useless. Often they believe that. But it turns out they're freaking rock star budgeters because they've had to feed a family of four on £100 a week longer than anybody else. They can make money go further than anybody. So they need to understand the abilities that they've gained through this as well. So banks are often playing a much bigger part now in understanding financial abuse and stopping transactions. I think financial advisors need to understand, when the son of somebody who's been a client for 20 or 30 years comes in and the son pops down the power of attorney and goes, right, we're closing all my parents' accounts, we're taking out all the money. For the financial advisor to sit there and go, wait a second, how is this in mum's best interest or dad's best interest? Who are you? Why are we doing this? Instead of going, oh, okay, no worries. Yeah, you've got the document. Make the calls, put them into the bank. I think this is a transaction of financial abuse. I think the son is trying to steal his parents' funds. Making those calls, asking the questions, they're really, really uncomfortable questions. Asking that person to leave the room so you can talk to your client. We now have a series of 13 steps that one of the Australian government bodies has set up for financial advisors for elder abuse, where even your staff will be asked, did the financial advisor ask the person there to leave the room? Did they have a private conversation with the client? Were they asking more than yes or no questions? Were they getting the client to speak in their own words? So there's so many people who can have a role to play, from, your bank tellers to your advisors to other members of the family. And look, you still may not stop it. You may be too late. But the fact that somebody saw and was brave enough to say something is really important.
I think that is actually very, very spot on. Well, in terms of vulnerability, I think women and elderly are the most vulnerable. And what can these, persons who are vulnerable do to protect themselves? Because they say prevention is better than cure. So how what are, would I say, preventive measures? Yes. What are the
Yeah,
preventive
so
measures?
yeah, educating yourself about financial literacy is really important. I think always maintaining your own bank account is really important. even in a family, I don't think it's a bad thing for a husband and wife to have personal accounts, but a joint account to pay the family bills. And if there's disparity in the wages, instead of being 50-50, is it going to be, well, your wage is a lot higher, you'll pay 70%, I'll pay 30%. So it's comparative and understanding that, your wages can go into your own account, but then there's these joint accounts. Or is it you take care of the mortgage and I'll take care of the other things? So every family has a different dynamic and you've got to find what will work for you. I know a woman who used to use the idea of a binding financial agreement. They used to be called prenups, with a new partner. Are you open to that? Can we have a discussion about it? And if they're not, she used it as a method of weeding out potential danger because they weren't prepared to work out an agreement before they entered into a formal relationship. So she's like, well, that's a loving thing to do on both sides, especially as we get older. It's like you might have children from a former, I do. We want to protect our families. So, yeah, she'd use that as a tool and ask people, if you don't know what you don't know, he's making me pay for the pizza every Friday. Is that okay? Just little things. It's, maybe it is how you do it in your family. Maybe it's a red flag. So understanding and getting feedback going, well, it just feels a bit weird. And we don't trust that gut intuition enough. We just push it down and go, oh, maybe that's how he does it. Maybe that's how he was raised. Or that might have been how they did it in their family, instead of going, this doesn't sit right with me. I want to dig a bit deeper. Why can't we go halves in the pizza? Like I said, it's just a little example or thing, but, ask around. Is that normal?
Mm. The prenup thing, it's quite controversial. Prenups. And I think especially for people that are pretty much on the religious side, the belief when to come together, they're one, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's always essential to protect yourself. I'm very big on martial arts, and something the referee will always instruct you before a mixed martial arts fight is obey my commands at all times, protect yourself at all times. Right. So a
But it
prenup.
should also be a red flag if someone isn't, prepared to protect themselves and you. Why? Why is it so difficult to have that conversation? And maybe even coming up with a way of framing it. Our friends Billy and Marge were getting, together. Do you think they should get a BFA or a binding financial agreement? Have you heard about those? What do you think about them? So you can frame it not, I think we should get one, but, you can sound someone out beforehand about their feelings on those kind of things. And again, protect yourself. Too hard down the track. If you've lost your kid's inheritance, that's a harder conversation to have than, your late father who left all that money for me. Sorry, husband number two's run off with that. That was your legacy, but yeah, soz. Didn't do anything to protect you. That's a worse conversation.
There are financial vampires everywhere and gold diggers, especially when it comes to celebrities and sports stars. So what happened with Hakimi, the footballer, the PSG player, and even recently Israel Adesanya, the mixed martial arts superstar. His ex-girlfriend was trying to sue him, to share his wealth. And his father is a chartered accountant. And from where I come from in Nigeria, there's some people say in Nigeria, Nigeriano they carry last, meaning we don't come last in any competition. See, Nigeria never comes last. We might not be the first, but we'll never be the last.
And look, you've had some really high profile cases in the UK. I'm sure lots of people have opinions about Paul McCartney's last divorce. How that
It's crazy how the lady wants to claim something and only for her to realize that the guy doesn't own anything in his name.
it's such a horrid thing. Like when I was in Uganda, you think these people got nothing. They're living on less than $2 a day. They break rocks 8 to 10 hours a day for a living. And it still happens. Like we met this lady in a mud hut with 3 kids whose husband sold their mattress and cooking pots when he left. You think these people have nothing to start with, but by the time he'd done with her, there was nothing more. Right through
Rock
to
bottom to rock bottom.
God, to the Britney Spears of the world or the Mickey Rooneys, that get taken in elder abuse or the conservatorship or guardianship, as we call it in Australia and the UK probably. So it doesn't matter what your means are. Like you said, there's financial vampires everywhere ready to take advantage, from people on, living on social security right through to the super wealthy. Obviously, I think it makes a lot more sense to prey on someone super wealthy if you're going to do it. But if you
Robin
want a
Hood.
greater payday, but yeah, the binding financial agreements are important. They're an agreement between you.
But there are cultural nuances, right? So for me, I'm
Absolutely.
African and Nigerian. We have this culture wherein there are gender roles that have been passed on from generations to generations. But a lot of couples are having serious issues, right now, especially with the wave of immigration from Nigeria to the UK to the US. These couples facing a different economic climate, a different economic ecosystem. So typically, as a Nigerian male, you are trained to be an alpha male, and you're trained that you have three major responsibilities, towards the women in your life. That is to protect, to preserve, and to provide. So the average Nigerian man, not the fake ones, not the one with the fake
Not the
Nigerian
rich
DNA.
princes.
Not the ones putting our name on the mud. Because guess what? Do you know what the population of Nigeria is?
No, I don't actually.
You know that Nigeria is over 220 million people. Nigeria is like number 6 or number 7 in terms of the most populous countries in the world. So after the India, China, Indonesia, US, Brazil of this world, you're talking about the next bracket is, the Nigerias. So it has a super massive population. And of course, we know the law of numbers. Anytime we have a large population, there's a lot of randomness to the variables. And then there's a good mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the ugly keep outshining the good.
And I mean, that's not just, a Nigerian way of being. For centuries, it has been that the man is the breadwinner and the woman stays home with the family. That's not new. That's been around forever. And I think the fact that we're facing this new normal, which has only
Mhm,
been in the last 100 years,
mhm,
following the two world wars, where women have gone into the workforce, where you
mhm,
can't make ends meet if you don't have two incomes, that
mhm,
children, are forced into care because the parents both have to work. It's not a normal way that we've known societally for
mhm,
thousands of years. It's is something very new that we're navigating because it is different, and that, people are being taken advantage of because of these changes, but they are very new still. And to try and work our way through them, it is a very different thing. And like you said, culturally, it's not just Nigerian, it's everywhere that was the normal, that the men would do that. And like you said, there's still ratbags. There's still the guys who are going to beat their women anyway. There's still the guys who are going to take advantage. There's still the guys who are going to play
Steal
along.
from the women.
And there's women who are going to do that as well. There are the gold diggers. There are one of the guys I caught a cab with in Uganda said he was very reluctant to enter relationships because most of the women, all they wanted was a guy who had a really good income so that they could take advantage. So he was reluctant to even get a girlfriend because of the expectations. So it's everywhere now that, these roles are changing so quickly, and to protect and learn and adapt and move to these changes, it's new roles for everybody and new rules. So it's not an easy thing to work through.
Hmm. And like you rightly said, new roles, new rules. Now, there are a lot of, for the lack of a better word, unreasonable women out there. Unreasonable young women, right? They keep putting out very distasteful, statements on social media, talking about, oh, they cannot date or they cannot be with, a man who does not, pay all of the bills, blah, blah, blah. But let's think about it in the reality, how many of the average men out there can actually pay, the bills for themselves and for the woman, and if they possibly have kids, right? And you hear women saying things like, "My money is my money, your money is our money." What's your thought on
My
these
mum
kind
used
of
to say, "What's
things?
yours is mine and what's mine's mine," as a joke. But I mean, it has become a big problem. And I think that again goes back to that whole consumerism where, you want to be seen to be something. But having said that, the role of the traditional wife, and I believe the hashtag trad wife is coming back where, they want to stay at home with the children and do the baking and keep the house tidy and, have those former roles that were just so normal back again. Look, there's going to be rat bags everywhere, and it's I think difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff, to use an expression you're probably familiar with. But if they're advertising on social media that that's what they want, that should, to a guy who doesn't want to be part of that, cut them out as a potential mate.
And then complain that they are not having, mates, they're not having potential partners. Like, I don't know, but good luck to them anyways. And social media is a very strong influence in this age and time. We have, really fantastic individuals like yourself that are paying it forward to the younger generation and putting that hard work out there to educate people on financial literacy. And then you have these young influencers, talking rubbish on social media, and the young girls are listening to these things. I'd love for you to touch on, the role of women at least taking up some responsibility. I am not a 50-50, individual. I don't believe in 50-50, but I believe in having women that take some sort of responsibility in order to ensure that there is that financial equilibrium in a home front setting. But you are an experienced person. You're married with kids and a grandmom as well, so you have seen you've seen things. So I don't know what your advice would be to young women, for them to be financially responsible individuals and also partners that would be helpful and create a happy home, because money does not buy happiness, but it
One of
determines happiness.
the biggest things is communication. So when you're going into relationships, understand what the roles are, where your partner's grown up, what their expectations are. Do they want the wife to stay home and raise the children until they go to school? Some people find that out at the last minute and go, wait a second, I'm having a baby and 6 weeks later I'm back at work. And you're like, whoa, that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to be the mum and to raise the kids. So understanding, your partner's belief systems on all those fronts is really important. And if the women are going to take a long time out or be a full-time mum, is that role valued? Will you help me top up my retirement fund while I'm taking that time out? Or if we need to care for either set of elderly parents, and I'm not going to be working, will you help? Do you value what I'm doing? From if we had to pay someone to do that role, would it be 40,000 quid a year? Would it be 60? Do we have to put a dollar value on it to be able to understand the value of what we're doing? Hopefully not. But for some people, that's how their minds work. So it's like, right, if I did have to fund it, if I did get a carer, if I did get an au pair or something like that to come into the family. So having those open and honest conversations is about learning about each other and expectations, because often it's the missing of expectations that causes the friction. It's like, well, I expected that you would stay home and raise the kids. And it's like, well, I never wanted to do that, but you never spoke about it. So you've completely missed their expectation, but you're acting completely true to yourself. So understanding each other, which it goes into every part of life. Do you want your partner, your male partner, if we're talking traditional relationships, to be the breadwinner? Or are you the one who's going to make more money? It was a bit different in my husband and my situation where I was a higher earner from a bit younger. I went out and did my master's degree. He was doing labouring style jobs and I could make more. So, but I was also doing all the traditional home roles as well. which was exhausting, and I did burn out. So, we had to reevaluate our relationship and what we were doing because we didn't talk about it. We didn't know the expectation. We didn't set them. We just suddenly at 35 just had teenage kids and a mortgage and a couple of jobs and would see each other here and there. And then I sort of went, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Like from the outside looking in, it all looks really cool. But how did I get here? What are we doing? And had to have a really big think and a bit of time apart to work through that. Again, because I'd never seen that modeled. My parents didn't talk about that stuff. It was just implied. So I think that's a
Let's
really...
go with the flow.
Yeah, it just works. And, if there's any issues, pop them under the carpet until the carpet becomes a mountain. You can't sort of walk around it anymore. And then it goes, and, you have to suddenly have the conversation. So I think setting those expectations early is really, really important.
Back to your financial abuse specialist accreditation. How can a person get that accreditation?
So in the UK, Standards International is the body that is rolling out the course. So if you go to standardsinternational.co.uk, there is the financial abuse certification course there that you can check out. We are just remodeling it at the moment. I've just finished rewriting the course book. So yeah, you can have a look there, and I'll shoot you the details to put in the show notes if you like.
Well, definitely, I would like to put that in the description. I think that would be really helpful to a lot of people. Yeah, at least when you get educated regarding something, they say if it was not documented, it was not done. We see that a lot in audits. So once people go through that course, I think it's a game changer and a life changer. That's why I had to try to pick up on that. That would be helpful, and I strongly recommend that anybody watching or listening to this should make an effort to take on the course. How much does it cost?
Off the top of my head, I think it is £697. I will double check that and let you know. But it's that
Okay.
reticular activating system, isn't it? If you want to buy a red Honda, suddenly all you see on the road is red Hondas. You're like, oh, who knew there were so many? Or a yellow Lamborghini. You might not see so many of those. But it's that we've turned on that part of our brain that's actively looking. And all of a sudden we've done that with financial abuse as well. It's like, there's a sign, there's a flag. I'm not comfortable with that. So it's that system where we're switching on something to be a bit more aware of.
Something they used to say in school back in Nigeria growing up. I say, if you think the cost of education is too much, then try ignorance. And then you see the cost of ignorance is actually more.
Indeed.
So yeah, I strongly recommend that course. It can save not just an individual's life, but the life of households. It has that trickle down effect. When one individual in one household is financially well educated, it actually saves the rest of the household. So sometimes you just need that one person that is financially educated to save the whole of a family.
It's how the Hunger Project works with educating women. They know it won't just impact their immediate family, but then the extended family and then the community. So there's that, again, that trickle effect of education impacting everybody.
And of course, speaking of education impacting everybody, your own children, your adult children are in your financial planning business. So what's it like running a family-owned business, and what lessons have you learned from this dynamic?
Do you want the real answer or the diluted?
I want the real concentrated answer.
It's hard. It's hard. It really is, because I worked with my parents as well. And to me, in the office, they were John and Christine, and at home, they were mum and dad. And my children can't do that. I'm mum all the time. So that dynamic is quite difficult. And I think they also have that thought process of, I'll just duck out early, it's just mum, she'll let me. So there can be that tendency to not work as hard or take a little bit of advantage. So I had to have a professional at one stage come into the business and help set values and boundaries. Because also as a mum, it's like, I can be a bit lenient. It's okay. Whereas there's no way some of the behaviours that happen would happen for another employer. So that's very difficult to also manage. So yeah, there's the truth. It's not easy. And look, if you can stick through it, hopefully you'll have a better family. But there's some businesses and families that really, really, really shouldn't do it. Absolutely.
You know, I'm laughing because just recently I recruited my youngest sister as the new executive assistant for this podcast. And at the beginning of the contract, I gave her a sign-on fee and I told her, look, when it comes to the business of this podcast, I am not your brother. I'm a different beast.
Good morning.
I think it's always very important to sound the warning at the beginning.
Yes.
And
The contracts, like you said, this is a formal working relationship. It's not just,
it's a
you know,
formal working relationship. And sometimes I feel like I'm probably maybe harder on her than I would be on an outsider because you cannot afford to let family sleep off. And I always try to explain that it is actually for your personal development. Yeah, I think when they
good ground
see
rules.
the why, they appreciate it. But sometimes when you try to act in a disciplined approach to a person and you don't explain why, sometimes it feels like why is this beast acting in a ravaging beast mode?
It's for your benefit.
Yeah, you're very, very correct. There's always that, tendency for when you work with family and friends for them to cross the line they wouldn't cross with a typical employer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But, as a seasoned leader in your own space, what does ethical leadership look like to you in today's business world?
I think being very clear about your values, mine are family, community, and integrity, and sitting down and working out. I mean, there's a great big long list you can choose from, but to me, we try to live them every day. Very involved in, I suppose, family, obviously running the family business and playing grandmas as often as possible. The community is important to me, not just my local community, but global, hence my trips overseas and involved in charity work. And integrity. I want to be able to sleep straight in my bed every night. I want to know that I've done the best thing by my clients. I want to be raising awareness of financial abuse, not a perpetrator of it. So those things that mean a lot to me, I think if you're driven by something that is true, I mean, anyone can put integrity on their values. Doesn't mean it's true. So living it will make it real. And I think that's the easiest way to ethical leadership is to be the example and understand it.
So for me, the thing on my mind right now is DEI initiatives. And we saw what happened in America when President Trump made, the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives non-mandatory. And we saw how corporate America responded to it. A lot of organizations started scrapping the DEI initiatives, the DEI programs. And that actually validated my conspiracy theory about these people just being unreal, these people just practicing these things to tick the box, to check the box. So you only get to know where their real values lie when these initiatives are not mandatory. Or what's your take on DEI, and do you think it's a good thing? Where do you stand on the whole DEI debate?
I think people are people, and the best people for the job are the best people for the job. I get that, but I also understand that we all have our personal biases, whether we want to or not. And for some
Unconscious
corporates,
biases.
yeah, I think sometimes mandating it for some people might let the gems in that they perhaps otherwise wouldn't have seen. When they're doing it on a token effort to tick a box, I don't think it's ever going to work. It's just, look, we're looking for the brown guy, we're looking for the female, we're looking for, the token Indigenous person. I don't think that box ticking exercise is ever going to work. But when you look at the results of, okay, what's the results of having women on boards? Oh my God, is it going to be financially impactful for your business? Sure is, if you look at the results. So, are you doing it because you're results driven? Are you doing it because you know it's better for the company or for everyone? When we're in India working with the Hunger Project, there is what they call a caste recommendation for local government and for women. So there's women who they call the untouchables who have been voted into local government as a token effort. And that's where the charity I'm in, as the Hunger Project, comes in and trains these women, going, right, now you've got a voice. And some of these women have never said their name outside their own home. They've got no idea what to do, but they're voted in because they think they can be controlled. So all of a sudden, these women are advocating for things that matter. They want a toilet block in their village. They want a school in their village. They want to stop their daughters being raped on the way to school. They want sanitation. They want the forests cleaned up. So is it a way of where a token effort is making a massive impact? It kind of is. So I know it can work in places, and I know in some it's just box ticking. So, I see the benefits and I see the disadvantages of it. And I think, like you said, the corporate America that's just gone, oh, thank God we can get rid of that, and scrapping it, they're showing themselves who they are.
Mm-hmm.
If you want the pale, stale male working for you for the rest of your life and you think they're the best options, that's what you're going to do anyway. If you see the benefits of going, women on board's a great idea, people of colour, people of different ethnicity. I mean, America's been a melting pot like Australia, where we're countries that are based on immigration, people from all over the world. We're global melting pots. We've got the most beautiful and diverse foods that we can choose from every night. We've got cultures that we can learn from and communities. And yeah, there are areas that become enclaves and aren't safe, but that's all part of the diversity of our nation. So if we can't embrace some of that and give back to some of those people who want to be part of our communities, I think that's really sad too. But I guess I understand both sides, where it's, who are we serving? It's a very complex area, and I'm glad I'm not a policymaker in that space. And look at me, I'm not terribly diverse. I've just employed my family and a couple of in the Philippines. So who am I to discuss diversity and inclusion?
Let's talk about the Hunger Project, right? I love the adventure that it has afforded you, from the plains of Uganda to the hills of India. But how have those experiences influenced your approach to money, leadership, and legacy?
Well, the programs I went on were actually called leadership and immersion programs. And I kind of had to think about that and went, okay, I'm going to Uganda to learn from communities where most of the people live on less than $2 a day. And there might be the cynic in some of us that goes, what leadership could I possibly learn from that? And the immersion is obviously into the cultures that you're doing. And I think to walk away understanding how, this is intergenerational poverty that these communities are dealing with. And all of a sudden this group turns up and goes, we can show you how to get out of that, but you've got to do the work. I mean, that's confronting. There's communities that go, no, it's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. We're still waiting to be rescued. We want government. We want an aid organisation. We want a community leader to save us. Whereas it's the teach Amanda Fish mentality. If we embrace these projects, if we learn how to better manage our agriculture, if we have investment opportunities with microfinance, if we learn how to get better crops and, raise our chickens and can share them with the community and the pigs and whatever, it's this leadership for me, it was all about the mindset. How do you go from it's always been this way, there's nothing I can do to save myself or anyone else, it's just how it is, to, you know what, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And I thought that was the most magical thing I took out of the lessons, going, I have no excuse in my life not to be able to implement that philosophy when I don't have those. I've got a whole different set of challenges, absolutely. But it was such a beautiful experience to be humbled and learn those leadership lessons from amazing people who had to take that mindset shift very seriously And to come away, and I was, I guess, so excited and loved it so much. I've done 3 of the projects now, so, and all very different and amazing people to learn from, and having that, ability to be able to get that smack of perspective up the side of the head, which I think we all need to have that global citizen mentality. It's very easy to sit there and go, oh, the immigrants are killing the country, and, all the stuff that we're fed, that take our jobs, all the stuff you hear over and
They're
over.
eating the
Whereas
dogs, they're eating the cats.
it gives you such different perspectives to be able to learn from and be open to, what would make a person leave their country of birth and their family and everything they've known and gone to a whole new country looking for experiences that they wouldn't have at home. That's brave,
Fortune favors the brave.
Indeed. So I think trying to see things from a different angle or from a different perspective is so valuable in life.
I love the way you frame it. And speaking of the teach a man to fish mentality, that Chinese proverb is one of my favorite proverbs. Give a man a fish, you fed him for a day. But teach a man to fish, you fed him for a lifetime. And the adventure that you've had, I love the fact that you, anyways, I'm biased because I'm African, you know, you had that African, adventure. But from a personal perspective, like, would you say you had any form of, I say, spiritual awakening in Africa? Because the vibe of every continent is different. The vibe in Australia is different. The vibe in Africa is different. Once you just touch down on the land, this is a different ecosystem. Like, what did you feel on a personal note in Africa?
Africa had always been somewhere I had dreamed about going. I started reading Wilbur Smith books when I was a teenager about the history of Africa and the tribal relations, and I fell in love with the place. And when I actually landed there and got there, I bawled when I left Uganda. I really cried. It's a place that gets under your skin. The people, I mean, the skies are big in Australia. The skies are huge in Africa. You've got abundant and a magical wildlife like we have here. So there was that kinship, I think, with the land. We've got, the oldest Indigenous nation on earth. You've got such, the tribal systems going back, generations. So probably not a usual similarity, but I felt that kinship with the land in Africa, and, torn apart as well with racism and colonialism and, horrific histories, not only amongst tribes, but then amongst the different nations. So it's, when are we going to learn? I think that was my history history lesson over and over. You come away
And you see
going,
the similarity in the humanity.
yeah. And after one of my trips, where I've been sitting in this mud hut with this woman, Eveline, whose husband had, financially abused her and abandoned her and her children. And then I flew to Dubai to meet a girlfriend. And, there's these incredibly wealthy women walking around with 4 guys behind them holding all their bags from all the stores. And there was almost this moment of, I felt physically sick, that it was just, how do I reconcile it? Neither's wrong. It's her circumstances and her circumstances. But there was that, the rich get richer, poor get poorer. How can that be 5 hours away from here? And there's this almost obscene wealth versus the obscene poverty. And that was very difficult for me to get my head around for a while. I really struggled with that, and then came back thinking my children were the most entitled little twats on the planet, and how dare they not, appreciate everything we do. So it was very confronting and a lot to work through. But again, it's a beautiful place that got under my skin and gave me a lot to think about.
You alluded to something that I discussed with somebody on the podcast recently, and it's a concept in economics called the vicious cycle of poverty. I think you called it generational poverty. Poverty will continue, in a lineage, in a community, in an ecosystem from generation to generation, except a particular generation is acted upon by an external force. That is the theory of the vicious cycle of poverty. Somebody has to stamp their foot on the ground, right? And I could understand when you were talking about some people being reluctant to do the work. Now we are here. Bless you. Express yourself. We are the authentics here. We take no prisoners. I think, and I always say, poverty and wealth are a thing of the mind. Even when I don't have money in my bank account, I'm just a rich man. I'm just a wealthy man with cash flow constraint. That's my mindset.
And it's not just poverty. I mean, that's domestic violence as well. There's a cycle where that's all you've seen and witnessed, and many become perpetrators. Instead of going, it stops with me, most do it because it's all they've ever seen. So there has to be that moment
Exactly.
where, like you said, someone stamps their foot and says, this ends with me.
Mm-hmm.
Hubby and I were living, hand to mouth when we had the two kids. My father had always said, keep your life simple. Just, take on enough work. Don't complicate things. That didn't work for me anymore. We weren't getting ahead. We couldn't give our children opportunities. We had no money left each week. There was one time I couldn't afford a free Subway sandwich because I couldn't afford the $2 for the drink. And it was that moment when you look back and you go, this ends with me.
No
This
way.
ends now. Like, it's just, this is ridiculous. That no longer serves me. What do I need to do to change this? I get
I
it.
love that. In Nigeria, in my tribe, is a Yoruba tribe. There's a saying. They say "Kodaki Babajia Kiyomotungbe," meaning it's not a good thing for a father to suffer in poverty and then the child inherits it.
Over and over and over.
If your father was a poor man, you decide, I don't
Yeah.
want this.
I'm
You
stamping my
know,
foot. I'm making the change. Yeah.
they say, okay, I'm just trying to, would I say, interpret from Yoruba to English in my head right now. They say ìyà ò kí ń ṣomi ọbẹ̀, meaning suffering is not a tasty soup, right? There's nothing beautiful, there's nothing appealing about suffering, right? You have to stamp your foot on the ground. But the interesting thing is you can take the horse to the stream, but you cannot force it to drink. A lot of people who are poor are stuck in that mentality, and I call it an entitlement mentality. They believe in alms giving, just give me, give me, give me. And when you tell them, come, I'm not giving you, I will teach you how to get it. They lack the psychological willpower, the mental power, the mental fortitude to believe, to conceive, believe, and achieve, to believe that, okay, they can also partake in, productive activities that can change around their situation. So I know you must have dealt with these kind of, individuals, what I say, repetitively
In
in
Africa, it
your
was
work.
very
How did it
fierce.
go?
The little children would, stand there. Hey, Mzungu, give me your money. A white person, you're obviously rich. Just hand it to me. And it was one of those moments where you go, I'm getting it. The aid agencies just come in and do the handouts and leave again. So there's that. We just want someone to come in and do that over and over, not understanding that we can fix this. So yeah, that was quite interesting to see that right from very little, it's just, oh, you're white, you're rich, hand it out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the work that they do and the pride in the villagers that had risen above that poverty line, and they wanted to show you their work and their crops and their families, and that they'd now got tin roofs and they've got lining rushes on the floor, and that beauty of the hand up, not a handout. And it was just magical to see the difference in those people who'd accomplished it.
I love that because, like I always say, poverty and wealth start from the mind. I remember growing up, my mom always taught us the mentality of being a giver. And I saw situations in which, okay, we had visitors that, yeah, these people were clearly financially better off, but my mom would always have something to give these people as a parting gift. She was always giving, giving, giving. And that shaped my mentality, about value system. Like when you're a person of value, when you give a person value, you get value in return. You know, my father taught us the mentality of win-win in business. When you're in business with anybody, make them feel happy to give you their money. Offer them something, right? And go above and beyond to offer them something that they wouldn't get, from the regular person doing the same trade as you. And you see how these people will be happy because you cannot sell a bad product twice. You must always ensure that you aim to be the best on nothing. Always give people value because money is a store of value. It's not like people don't like to spend money. They just want value for money. And when you get that hack, I think you get the money game right. So I really don't get it. A lot of people feel like they have nothing to give, or you always have something.
It's our most precious gift that we can give people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just somebody needs someone to listen. So it doesn't have to be financial or physical. Sometimes it's just our time. And we've all got that.
So what would you say was a common denominator between the haves and also the common denominator between the have-nots that you were able to observe in that African ecosystem?
It was the mindset. It was the ability to be able to flick the switch and say, if it's going to be, it's up to me. I'm going to learn. I'm going to change. I'm not going to live like this forever, and turn it around. And yet we met people who still did. No, it's not for me. I don't want to do it. Don't want any part of it. I'm not changing. I'm comfortable. So that was the difference. It was choosing. And then it was the education.
Breach yourself from mental slavery. The legendary Bob Marley. Another Yoruba joke just came into my head right now, right? And I'll try to translate it literally for you. Now, if somebody is suffering, right? Yoruba people will say, "Onjeya," meaning it's literally like you're eating the suffering, right? And they could also twist it in another way and say, "Iyan iyan je onitong," like the suffering is eating that person. And then there's this joke about there's a difference between you eating the suffering and the suffering eating you. Because if you're the one eating the suffering, you can decide, I'm not eating the suffering again.
Absolutely.
But if it's the suffering that is eating you, suffering does not know full stop. It keeps eating, it will ravage you.
Indeed. I think
So
that's
it's
really
like,
cool though, because suffering, okay, nobody wants it, but you can
mm-hmm,
choose it to make you stronger.
mm-hmm,
I think people who've lived without suffering are missing out because they
mm-hmm.
don't value some of the things they have because they haven't had to
Yeah,
struggle to get them. So
yeah.
struggling can be a means to an end if you then value what you receive from it.
Mm, very true. Speaking of struggles, you trekked with gorillas, scuba dived in Lake Malawi, right? And of course, worked with the Himalayan entrepreneurs. So, how have these global adventures influenced your methodology and your mindset, in terms of your leadership, philosophy, and of course, financial planning as well?
I think it makes you feel much more global citizen and very aware of speech that can divide, which there seems to be a fair bit of at the moment. I see now in places that I visit, it's I'm this political party, you're that political party. I either have to convince you to believe the way I do or I want to kill you. Instead
Mm.
of, I think the Australian way of, oh, you believe that, I believe that, let's go have a beer.
Why hate when you can collaborate?
Exactly. So I think there is that more collaborative, you're more willing to live and let live, to let other people have ideas. But be open to listening as well. I mean, you don't have to take on somebody else's ideas, but you might understand a little bit more about them by listening instead of, I don't believe that, you're wrong. Maybe it's just different. It's not wrong. It's a different way of looking at things. And nearly everybody's got that. So I think there'd be a lot less conflict if we just did that, viewed something as, well, that's a different point of view. I don't have to hate you for it or fight you for it. It's just a different point of view. So that has been very impactful for me. My dad's a very right, wrong, black, white. If it's not how I do it,
My
it's
way
this
or
way.
the highway.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was a very favourite expression. And just understanding that sometimes it's not right or wrong. It could be grey. Maybe it's right
There are
for
all these
them.
gray areas.
But that was a big lesson for me because, again, you take on what you grow up with and you're influenced by. So, yeah, it's a very cool lesson though.
I always say that traveling is a very, very important fabric of the education system. But a lot of people don't realize it. If you're not well traveled, it means you're not well enlightened. I've been privileged to have been in, a few places, in the world, and the knowledge and exposure and enlightenment that I have been humbled with from just experiencing how different people do different things, do the same set of things, in different ways across the world. And there's no right or wrong answers to different things.
Many people are frightened by what's different.
It's made me a better person. I'm not gonna lie. And I know you can attest to that. But what would you say has been like your biggest lesson from traveling around the world?
From traveling, I think it helps you realize you aren't the center of the universe, that it's a big, beautiful world out there with lots of people who do things differently. And I think if you become very insular and you never go anywhere or do anything and live within your own community for all your life, you're missing out on some beautiful experiences and people and customs that you wouldn't have learnt anywhere else. You can be a bigger, better person from travel.
Okay, for everybody listening, please travel. There's this joke in Nigeria. He said, I want to travel, but my bank account is telling me to sit at home. I am not the financial planner. This is the financial plan. If you have financial problem, don't call me. But if you have business plan, business proposals, come and talk to us.
You're the guru.
Let everybody carry their cross.
Stick to your lane, like we said earlier.
Pick your lane and respect yourself. That was just on a lighter note. You are also a podcaster. What inspired Financial Secrets Revealed, and how has it enriched your perspective on money and human behavior?
The podcast came after the book of the same name, where I did the interviews with everybody. And I'm just nosy. So I loved listening to people's money stories about what makes us different, what other views are out there. The lady who'd been financially abused, her parents had taught her when you drive past a big house that those people are bad people and you had to do something bad to get ahead in life. And I'm like, that's a thing. People think that. So we don't know what motivates people and what their parents have taught them or their views. So, and then it makes you question your own. It's like, oh, well, I learnt this and I learnt that. Do I still believe that? So it put it on me. Like, again, here I am teaching people about money. But when you ask everyone, what did your parents teach you? They all say nothing. My parents taught me nothing. But when you dig a bit deeper, there were those lessons that, weren't spoken about. But when you say to them, what are you going to teach your kids? That makes them think again, because it's like, well, I haven't taught them anything either. So it was a really lovely experience to hear people's stories, to hear the overcoming of adversity, and that, again, that different ideas can be completely opposite and still right. One financial advisor, when his son broke his iPad, wanted him to learn that, dad has to work a certain amount for him to be able to replace that. The time costs money. And another lady who's an entrepreneur said, I never want my children to think time equals money. So two completely different, and they can both be completely right. So fascinating to hear people's views and be open to new ideas. That's what I did it, and then just kept it going there. So the first season was all the people in the book that I'd interviewed. The second one was purely on financial abuse. The third one was meet the experts. So I've got another season coming out soon. So yeah, that I'll do it by seasons, but yeah, it's just been fun to be nosy about people's money stories.
Cannot wait for the next season. But while you were talking about that story about somebody when they see rich people, they be like, oh, they're bad people. It reminded me of something that happened with me and my brothers growing up. I think we had this family friend. This man, he's always beating about rich people. He said they are bad people.
Go, it's global.
But do you know what my brother said? See, one day he said, I don't want to be a good man. I want to be a bad guy.
There's motivation for you.
If it's a bad guy that are driving
Driving a Lamborghini, I want to be a
the
bad guy
good
too.
cars and living in the good houses, I want to be a bad guy.
Too funny. Too funny.
But it's crazy how people, just because you have not achieved that level of comfort or something, you just want to ridicule it and make it look bad. Come on, why?
What they were told, and they believed it, and they keep spreading it. So yeah, have a think. Have a think. Makes you turn around and go, I think that's ridiculous. But someone else might go, but that's what I've always been taught. But again, we can do that with our own beliefs. Somebody else might go, that's ridiculous. Why do you think that? And you're like, oh, I thought that was normal.
But I love my brother's perspective. I don't want to be a good. I want to be.
He's a funny man for a bad guy.
So please tell your kids they should not be good people. They should be bad guys.
No, I'm not telling them that.
You need a reorientation. Hey guys, you don't have to be good people.
Sometimes good people have rich houses too.
It's the era of the bad guys.
Maybe that's just Nigerian. I don't know.
But if it takes you to be a bad guy to live a good life,
Starting the superheroes for villains or something.
it's just ridiculous, like you rightly put it. But for someone like yourself, you frequently take the stage, speak to people, you mentor others. What's your advice, to aspiring young female leaders and entrepreneurs and those looking to become financial experts, you know, looking to amplify their voice? What's your advice to young women?
I think to be brave and listen to that inner voice that's telling you that. I don't think as a young woman I ever believed I'd have a voice or that I'd travel. There's a lot of things I'd go back and tell my younger self, but then, would I have made the journey that I've made to take me on this path if I'd done things differently? I came from a very patriarchal house where, dad was the breadwinner and mum had to stay home and we were told to keep it simple. And, it was just look after your husband and make the meals and be domestic. And, when you discover that doesn't work for you, that's also a very confronting moment because it's like, well, do I do what I've always been told or do I follow that dream? Because I'm the first person in my family, like many of our generation, who've got a university degree and done more. When my brother earned more than my father, that was quite confronting for him. So it's start listening to that inner voice. And, you might have to crash through some of what you thought was normal to be able to get where you need to go. And don't be afraid of making mistakes. They will shape you and you can learn from them. If possible, learn from other people's mistakes. Some of us need to learn from our own.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. They say experience is the best teacher, but it doesn't have to be your own experience.
Exactly.
But
They don't
let's
hurt us
try.
when you learn from others.
Let's going from experience. Let's try to fast forward into the future and speak about legacy. And 20, 30 years down the line, what do you hope would be your personal and your professional legacy?
I hope I've helped shine a spotlight on financial abuse, that other people start taking it seriously. And I think that's happening globally, especially since COVID, when many families were locked down and there wasn't an income. There was a massive spike in cases of domestic violence, and financial abuse, comes from that too. And, you talked earlier about being kind. I think it's the most beautiful lesson we can take from anything, because if we are kind, we won't be hurting other people financially,
Exactly.
physically, emotionally. So it's such a simple thing, and yet it takes a push sometimes for us to say something nice. We can be judgy in our own heads, and sometimes we say it out loud. If I see someone with Crocs, I'm judgy. Sometimes it's just, nice to tell someone, you look great today. And maybe that's just what they needed to hear, but we had to take the effort to do it. Being kind isn't always easy. So I probably won't tell you you are looking great if you are wearing Crocs, though. So
I think I used to belong to your school of thought. When it comes to Crocs, like it took me a while to accept that Crocs have actually come to stay.
no,
Because
they're
in my
not a
head, I'm
thing.
like,
They have to go. They
why?
have to go.
I'm like, why is this thing that is so ugly now so commonplace? I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
understand.
I don't get it. There's enough ugliness in the world without bringing that into your home. I don't get it.
But to be fair, they're quite comfortable. To
I
be
don't
fair,
care.
to be
How
fair,
do you
you know,
know? How do you know?
because I did have a friend who had one,
No, no.
and they were my same shoe size, and he was like, "Stop criticizing this thing. Just try it on." I thought, "Wow, it's comfortable and nice, but I don't think I'll ever buy one with my money." By the way, my birthday is in 2 days' time.
I'm not buying. Oh, my grandson too. There you go. Mind you, it's probably still the 6th for you. It's the 7th for me.
Oh yeah, still the sixth for me. My birthday is April 8th.
My
Please,
grandson's the 9th.
please do not buy me Crocs.
You might have to air this episode after your birthday then. You're going to get 14 pairs now. You know that, don't you?
What? That would be the most nightmarish.
The least stylish podcaster around.
Man, Crocs. I don't know. I think I've come to accept them, but not to accept them in my own space.
And then to level it up, there's socks and Crocs. Just don't get me started on that. See, I can be judgy, but I can still be kind.
It's really crazy how certain things that look ugly go mainstream, and that's the same way I felt about the Hummer Jeep, the Hummer SUV when it was raining. I'm like, I don't understand. Why would somebody buy a shoebox and call it a car and put it on the road?
Indeed. Oh, there's lots of little ones like that, isn't there? The little square shoeies and all those. So, cube, all them. Yeah, I
No,
get it.
no, no, no way, no way. But for the listeners that want to connect with you, what's the best channel to connect with you on?
Probably LinkedIn would be the easiest. So I'll give you all my contact, socials to pop in the show notes, but LinkedIn is probably the best.
Okay. And your books, are they available on Amazon? How can they get
Yeah,
your books?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Booktopia, Financial Secrets Revealed.
Okay, okay. And add the link to the show notes. Check the description. Wow, it's hard to say goodbye, but we have to say goodbye. So
Oh, it's been a
what's
long time. You're going to have to edit this one, right?
what's your final piece of advice to everyone out there? You know,
I think on the financial side, know your own numbers and live within your means, and you'll be on the track to be able to retain and grow some wealth. It's
no,
simple and it's boring. There's nothing sexy about if it, like I said, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So yeah, get rich slow.
but everybody wants to be on the fast lane.
Indeed.
Wow. Before you leave, do you want to leave a shout out to anybody?
To my beautiful family, thank you for supporting me in my work and for my beautiful grandbabies, and and all my friends in the UK.
Well, we're expecting you soon. We're expecting you soon. Wow. And from me to you, once again, it's a very, very big thank you. You shared your time, you shared your life with us today, and you shared your wealth of experience that I can never take for granted. Thank you very much, and God bless you. And of course, to our audience, watching or listening, please, what are you waiting for? Support by liking, sharing, commenting, dropping reviews. And of course, I'll keep working tirelessly to bring in amazing, amazing individuals like Amanda Cassar, Mikasa, Sukasa. And from me to you, it's love and respect. Till I come your way next time. Look after yourselves, guys.